absolutely. And we did discuss that, I think, a little bit the other day. Like something like sustainability is a
Hmm.
critical thinking issue, right? That's just not a left or right issue. It's a critical thinking issue, right?
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean, I think we've been, especially in the water community, we've been a little overwhelmed. I'll put it nicely with ESG and sustainability topics. But if we do look at it, critically and look and ask the tough questions, like how are you measuring, how are you monitoring, what are you doing with this information, how is it driving you to your goals, and what are your goals? And again, how are you measuring that and monitoring that? So all these things, instead of just talking about nice talking points for stakeholders, I think it's much more meaningful to talk about the how and why of getting there to make something sustainable. Because otherwise, it really becomes more of a topic it feels like a catchphrase, and that's all
Mm.
and it's very quarterly focused. And I don't think sustainability.
Yeah, there is. There really is. And also, again, right? There's going to be a lot more oil and gas production and more produced water. So there's going to be
Yep.
a lot more for you guys to do, right?
Yeah,
For lack of a
there's not
better
a
term.
shortage of things to look at and do.
No, there's no, definitely not. Um, I was looking over the website and for the Produced Water Society, and I had seen that it had started off sort of like informally, and then little by little it began to pick up. Was that how did that work as far as you know?
Yeah, I mean, Colin Tyree, he passed a few years ago. He was the founder and the originator of the whole thought of getting a group of people together in Houston. It was for lunches, and then I mean, there's probably a bigger backstory, but the thought was his is to get a group of guys and gals together in Houston to talk about produce water. And that was in 1990. Actually, it probably started a little bit before then, that grouping those luncheons and whatnot. But the nonprofit, the 503c, was formed in 1990. So that was kind of like how it got kicked off. But yeah, it started a little bit more informally. It was focused primarily offshore market, and we kind of have the last year or two have tried to get back to some of those roots of bringing back those folks from the offshore market that used to be kind of our that's what the society was about. Those are the topics that were talked about. So yeah, it's you know the last probably since 2016, the U.S. shale play, rush or boom, really has changed the dynamics of how we look and think and talk about produced water in the U.S. Um, Although it probably shouldn't be the only thing that we think about, because there's quite a bit of conventional uh, oil and gas production still in the U.S. and also around the world. So again, when we're talking about lessons learned, I think it's great to invite everybody to the party to talk and be a part of the discussion.
Right, right. Everyone, listen, to some degree or another, if we live on this planet, we're all stakeholders in what's going on. We're all stakeholders.
Absolutely.
I may not be directly involved. I may be several hundred people's arms lengths away. But it doesn't mean that I don't have a stake in what's happening in the overall picture, right?
For sure. For sure.
Um, and actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that it began with offshore because that's very interesting. Talk to me a little bit about how would one even begin to treat or deal with produced water in an offshore situation? What does that even look like?
I mean, the differences from onshore to offshore really are not that dramatically different. The biggest, physical difference is the space constraint. You don't have all the space that you have on a land-based operation, but really is talking about, weight, of the product, the equipment that's going out for the processing and treatment, and just the space that it requires. I mean, obviously, there are some other nuances, like metallurgy changes a bit. Some of the specifications change a little bit more strenuous as far as the requirements for manufacturing and for tolerances. But other than that, a lot of the aspects are pretty much the same. Again, they try to make it all the treatment of produced water that's going to happen and the management of produced water that's going to happen in a very compact area. So that's really kind of led the way for new technologies. If you're small and light, you have it in there.
Hmm.
When I got started, actually, I started in offshore as well,
Hmm.
um, way back in '94. Uh, so a lot of what I kind of learned for basics, is still the same today, but also can be applied, like I said, to the land-based operations. Even though you got a little bit more leniency with, the space that you have to deal with, but and good or bad, not a lot has changed since then. The quote unquote new technology then, when I was early '90s, was really developed. The latest quote unquote new technology was developed probably in 1982. There was some sand transports, so an upgrade to the compact, desanding hydrocyclones. De-oilers were launched off, mainly starting off in the UK,
Hmm.
and that kind of kicked off the early '80s. But that was the innovation, and that's kind of all that happened during that time. So
Hmm.
a lot of what we're using today is from the '80s, and again, which is good and bad. But I think a lot of what are from the '80s and '90s are kind of forgotten about today by especially the new crew that's coming in today. There's not been a lot of mentorship or education on these topics for foundational, primary, secondary, tertiary treatment. We do seem to focus a lot more on um, you know finer and finer uh, levels of filtration today and separation. Um, in many cases, it is required. Some cases, it's not. And then, of course, desalination is a whole other area of discussion that's leading the way. But I think a lot of it has to do with that latter part is because of the lack of available water to use and fresh water. I mean, we have less than 1% of the world's water available to drink. It's less than 1%. So it's there's a lot of water. Um, it's mainly made up of oceans, but not usable in its current state. And much like produced water, it can be reused for many different things, from fit for purpose reuse, frac flowback, to many other creative beneficial reuse applications that we talk about today. But again, something's got to be done with it to change the constituents so that it can be reused or used for the first time for a new purpose.
Hmm. I really appreciated what you said, that some of the newer technologies were developed in the 80s and 90s. And so some of the issues that come up with that is, one is you're going to have a loss of institutional knowledge, because a lot of people that were around in the 80s and the 90s, they've retired out, or
Yeah.
they've left the field. And so the people who really know and understand and had working knowledge, they're no longer available. And this is common across the spectrum in all
Right.
industries. Um, and it's interesting also how, and I didn't think about that. Much like much like the military or NASA, they're at the cutting edge, and like you said, it has to be lighter, it has to be smaller, and it has to work under all these conditions. And yet, at those cutting edges is where we begin to learn what are tolerances for certain things, and then what can we bring back to the mass market. And it's
Right.
fascinating that the Produced Water Society, it began in offshore, and because of the limitations, much like Gary Larson and the Far Side cartoons, right? He
Yeah.
said that he's stuck with one panel, unlike many other cartoons that have many panels. He's like, I only have one panel, so I have to be as creative as I can with that one panel. And then look what happened, right? He became a phenomenon in himself. And much the same way, offshore has to develop these technologies. That's what actually gets used for the most part because it has to work. Like, right, you can't run to town 30 minutes away and buy a part if you need it. It
Right.
doesn't happen like that. That's fascinating that
Yeah.
it's sort of kind of coming back to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. When you How did you get involved in oil and gas? What was,
Ah.
or let me go back a little bit further. What did you study at university?
Well, I thought I was going to do psychology, but focusing on business.
Hmm.
I touched on that a bit. Ended up, took a few classes and realized, oh, there's a lot of math. And not that I didn't like math. I'm like, oh, I was also an athlete. And so I wanted something that was manageable, especially with travel. Um, so, uh, but ended up that I kind of scrapped that idea, focused more on business, and then and focused a little bit more on international business specifically, as well as economics. And I'm like, oh, well, there's no math there. So yeah. Anyway, I didn't think that all the way through, but the whole the, economics, the whole supply demand aspect of how we live our lives today is still very fascinating. And so, yeah, basic business degree with international focus in economics, and then of course picked up a few. Well, I would love to say languages, but just enough to get by in two or three different languages to not starve to death or get too lost. Many of those skills are much weaker today. It's amazing when we don't use something how quickly it goes. But
Right.
yeah, it was fairly rounded. And of course, I in addition to being a student athlete, which paid for my education, I also worked a lot in various different aspects. Leading up to college and university, and then even throughout, kind of having different jobs over the years. And but I've always been very entrepreneurial. My families have always had businesses. Of course, I was probably supposed to go work for one of those businesses, but I decided, nope, that's not what I want to do. I mean, of course, I did work for them part time, kind of throughout my younger years, but I wanted to do definitely something on my own and on my own steam. And then, of course, starting out, I worked for some smaller family-run private companies, not my family, but other people's families, and learned a lot. It was actually, probably if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, I think it's probably a good idea if you want to learn some things early on, learn on somebody else's dime, instead of, unless you just really have a phenomenal idea and ready to go, learn some basic skills the first few years, and how companies operate, and, you how to make money, basically.
Right. Right.
Those sort of things. But yeah, it was a wide range of kind of areas that I pulled from to get to that point. And I was very lucky in the early 90s that I was able to taste a lot of different industries. I There probably wasn't an industry that I didn't touch across the board. Many of them I did not like, and
Hmm.
I knew
Hmm.
right away that I did not like. And then there were some ones that I really gravitated towards, like oil and gas.
Hmm.
But specifically, I tasted the upstream market. There wasn't much of a midstream market back in those days when it came to water, and then the downstream market. I did not like the downstream market, various different reasons. Gravitated toward the upstream. I found that the people I enjoyed the most, I felt like everything that I could do in that market really kind of, you were able to see kind of a more immediate success. Whereas downstream is a little bit longer and drawn out, and not as, I feel like, not as impactful. So that's kind of how I got started in the direction and kind of stuck with it. And I don't know, 30 years later, last month, it was my 30th year. I was kind of really shocked to reflect back on that and realize that 30 years had passed. Um, I always looked at those old guys that were around for 30 years and thinking they were old. So I guess I'm officially old now.
That's you, right? That's
I'm
you.
old. I'm that old guy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's but what an amazing perspective to take over this length of time, that you've seen so much progression, you've seen so much change. But let me go back, because you said something that was very highly fascinating. So you worked in a family business. I understand that working in a family business, it's not easy. Actually, it's 10 times harder than working for someone else, because it's not
If
just,
your
hey,
family, if your family, for
exactly.
sure.
Right. Hey, did you move the box from over here? Did you move the box over there? No, I forgot to
Right.
move the box, Joey. Hey, bada bing, you
Yeah,
forgot to move the box. Right? Like, if you really mess up, it messes up the family dynamic.
yeah.
Can you tell me, what are some of the lessons that you learned of working in your family business? What are some of the really critical things you learned about business and about life that you
Hmm.
took with you from that experience?
For sure, you have to work hard. Um, I think seeing like my grandfather and my grandmother, and everybody kind of throughout the family, how hard they worked, how dedicated they were. I think if you don't really have that work ethic and kind of belief that you have to work that hard and be that good, that you won't be successful, or definitely won't be as successful. So, I mean, that's just something that I saw work and learned that, I don't know, maybe I thought it was just everybody did that and that was natural.
Right.
But later on, I realized, oh, not everybody's like this, and not every company's like this. But I did see the value in that, not only just to make a successful business, but I believe that, and I think this is something that's lacking today. Uh, when you're selling a product or service, and offering something to the market, you should strive to be, fit your market niche, whether you're best of class or most affordable or whatever your niche is. But I think you really need to strive to be the best. And then, of course, your customers or clients should be satisfied. And that's something that I truly believe that is key today, to differentiating, the okay companies from the really great companies. And unfortunately, there seems to be fewer and fewer really great companies out there because, I don't know, I feel like kind of like COVID messed a lot of people and companies up,
Hmm.
their attitudes toward, customer service. I mean, we've all kind of got used to, well, that's the way that it is,
Right. Right.
which I don't think is a good thing.
Hmm.
I think we need to try to keep our standards high. But of course, when you do that, be prepared to be disappointed quite a lot. My wife always tells me, she's like, "Well, your expectations are way too high." I'm like, "Yeah, I know that.
Right.
I know that." And of
I'm
course,
concur.
social media has not helped with that. Expectation versus realities. Uh, you see something on Instagram, this, you know, highly filtered location with all the editing put into it, and then you get there and it's end up with, maybe with all the people, and it's not quite the same. So, I mean, there are things that you need to, kind of decide and edit for yourself, but at the same time, you know, being satisfied with an experience based on, hey, did I get what I paid for? Uh, were the people nice?
Right.
Did they value me? Those sort of
Hmm.
things, and that's the sort of things that in my day job at Produce Water Solutions we really focus on the customer. We don't say no a lot. I we probably say no never. I'm trying to learn to say no more, mainly to committing to different things, because again, you want to do everything, but you can't. There's only one of you. So,
Right.
but I do think that that does make a huge difference in the quality and satisfaction of our life, and of course, as a consumer, what we buy.
Hmm. So how first of all, you're absolutely correct. And I find that you're very correct that people have become very accustomed lately in putting up with substandard service, substandard products, substandard customer service. We've
Yeah,
all become accustomed to that. Like you say, I think that some COVID did have something to do with it, where we all collectively, I think, I'm tired. I'm just really tired, and I think that like the veil was down for everyone to say, hey, I'm not going to put up the shit. I'm just really tired.
yeah,
Um, and while that's fine and acceptable, because we're all human, right? We're all tired. But here's the kicker. The kicker is that the funny thing is that so many segments of society are allowed to say that, except for people in oil and gas. People in oil and gas are not allowed to say, I should turn the valve all the way. I'm just going to give it a quarter turn. I think that's enough. See, oil and gas does not get that. Oil and gas does not get the benefit of however we feel about it, because lives depend on it. Our lives, our coworkers' lives, everyone on pad, right? And their families, they all depend on us doing the right job and making sure that we keep up to standard. Oddly, it's funny how there's some talk bemoaning, like, oh, what happened to American rugged individualism? What happened to the ethos of the individualism in this country? It is very well found in oil and gas,
yeah.
because these are
No, I
people that really do need to make good on their word. Number
right.
one, because that's how we operate, and number two, because there's a target on our backs, and everyone is always watching and looking for whatever perspective, I was going to say prejudiced view, right? But whatever perspective that they have on what we're doing is very highly critical of what we're doing. And so
Yeah,
this is the industry that more than others has to be above board. But the same thing you would expect from aircraft manufacturers,
yeah,
right? Automotive manufacturers, because if these people aren't paying attention, people's lives are at stake.
yeah.
Um,
I think the big difference between automotive and the aircraft manufacturers and carriers um, is that oil and gas is the energy that supplies everything that we do, and also all the products that we buy. I mean, 80% of probably what's in your home or one's home and on their body is, and I'm probably being conservative with the 80%, is
mhm.
petroleum
Yes.
focused and derived from petroleum. So yeah, I mean, our lives are so dependent on this. I mean, it's the energy really is almost as today as important as air and water is to people um, to function. And we're I was just came from Copenhagen, where we group of environmentalists, we were talking, and I did a keynote there. They use the word greedy, that people were greedy with their energy consumption, which actually may be a good term. I don't know that I haven't used that one personally, but definitely I see that we got used to and have been getting used to a certain level of, you turn the light switch on, you turn the faucet on, you have something turning on or coming out. Um, we're not going backwards. And quite frankly, we are only consuming more and more. We are not consuming less. And so the need for more energy is higher than ever. So maybe they are kind of right with the terminology of greedy. We're definitely consuming more. We're hungrier for all of it. And so not only do we want it more, we want it all the time, anytime that we decide we want it. So that's a big difference. And that's why I think oil and gas and the energy sector really has to play a bigger role, because it is everything that we do. in our lives around the
Hmm.
world. Doesn't matter where you live, it touches that aspect.
Of course. And I know this is not your argument. I'm not asking you to defend an argument that is not yours. But let me ask. Let's go around the horn on this idea real quick. Okay, greedy and energy use is that? Can we say that right for energy use or consumption? Let's use consumption. Greedy on
Yeah,
energy
consumption
consumption.
is good.
Okay, copy. All right, so we'll use that. Um, okay, first, nothing exists in isolation. Okay, everything exists in a system of sorts. So even when we begin with greedy, and again, let's just follow the primrose trail for a moment. Okay, so greedy is saying that there's greedy and there's charitable, and that there should be something in between. That's the assumption when you say greedy, right? That there's something equitable, but you're deciding not to be equitable.
Right.
That's what's already built into the word. Okay,
Yep.
but that's not wholly accurate. And again, like I said, we're just discussing, right? But that's not wholly accurate because it's not like there's one BTU and I took the BTU and now you don't have it. It doesn't work that way. That way it does not work, right? Um, Energy is produced for people to improve their individual lives and the lives of all of us collectively as a society. That's what energy production is supposed to be about. It's not someone's fault. I live in Midland, Texas. Okay. I am sitting in my studio. I have lights on. I have an air conditioner going. Is that taking away from somebody in the most wretched, in the most destitute, in the most sand spitting place on earth? Am I taking energy away from that person? I'm not. I'm not. I want to be equitable. Nobody wants to be on the side of greed versus equity. However, I think that's a slightly disingenuous way of putting it forward, right? Because if you want to talk about greedy, well, who's greedy? Again, we're speaking very superficially, but let's go back to your countries. Let's go back to your leaderships. Let's go back to who's in control of this production, and then you'll find your bad guy, the guy in the black hat. Because over
Yeah.
here, we're just trying to kick out as much of it as humanly
Yeah.
possible, and y'all can do with it whatever y'all want. So I find that argument slightly disingenuous. Again, I understand the rhetoric and I understand the language, but that's part of the problem is that people take
Yeah.
language for reality, and it is not.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. As an entrepreneur, as someone who has an entrepreneurial spirit, how do you work? How do you work your entrepreneurialness today? How does it come out? How do you get out your entrepreneurial wilds?
Well, I'm always looking for new technology, personally myself, as well as for the different hats that I wear, whether it's for, the nonprofit or my day job or any ventures that I have. I'm always looking at, what's new, what's going to be better, what's going to improve things, what's going to fix things. So I think always kind of having that in the back of my mind, playing and looking for those opportunities. But then again, I'm also, not 25, so I'm not starting up businesses maybe like I used to in the past. Although I'm sure I've got at least one more or two more in me to take a look. I'm just looking for the right opportunity. But I think it's all about being open to uh, learning and sharing with others. And again, I think that plays very nicely into what I do in my both my roles with Produce Water Solutions and Produce Water Society. Is you look at you know what are the things that need to be fixed, how can we improve things, but a lot of that it comes back to not only just searching out the latest greatest tech, but different ideas, different mindsets, different methodologies, and being open to it. So you really do have to be open to continued learning. And again, I know in oil and gas we tend to fall back into this is the way that we do things, and I've even said we don't. I've fallen into that trap once or twice before. I've caught myself.
Sure.
because it's easy, because you play by these kind of quote unquote rules daily, and you kind of forget that you have to be open to questioning, why are we doing it this way? So again, I think that fulfills that segment of that need to be entrepreneurial, where you look at improving the status quo wherever you're at, kind of throughout the day. So there's a lot of opportunity for improvement,
Oh, sure.
even if it's just through sharing. Again, I've been seeing and valuing more and more education, and seeing how vitally important it is today. And again, sounds very simple. It is very simple, just not as easy and as quick as you would want it or think that it would be, because it does take a lot of time to depart information upon folks, and people. Sometimes you have to tell them multiple times, so that all that kind of missionary work that you're doing on a daily basis takes some effort. But yeah, I'm very feeling very satisfied with that little kind of tackling that small little aspect of the market. Probably much like like a lot of teachers feel. They look at, okay, what role am I playing? Well, obviously, teachers play a very important role, but they're not very, they don't get a lot of praise for that. But if they can make an effect on one or two child's lives or people's lives, then great. Um, so I think if we all kind of do little bits like that, that would make a huge difference. But not everybody's built the same. So,
Right. Um, so you and I appreciate what you say, right? Obviously, because it does take a while to disseminate information. It does take a while for people to, well, first of all, give you time of day. Second of
right,
all, who the hell are you? And
right.
then third, even conceptually wrap their head around what you're trying to tell them. And again, as we discussed previously, you can be in this industry and be an expert and not know squat about what happens, 6 inches away from what you do.
Yeah.
Um, and so we have to, and it takes a while to overcome that. I liked what you said about being a teacher, because actually this does lead to this question. As a parent, how many kids do you have, Steve?
No, I don't have any kids.
You don't have any kids.
Just
Okay.
nieces and nephews that
Nieces and nephews.
keep
Okay.
us busy. Yep.
So let me ask you, as someone who, or here, let me phrase, let me back up this way. Let me back up and let me ask it to you this way. Tell me a little bit about your first big love and your heartbreak, right? When you broke up, and how does that inform you today in terms of patience and helping people move on?
Hmm. Is our time up? Is the next question, how does that make you feel?
How does that make you feel? All right. My objective is to make you cry, Steve. This is it.
I
I am the new Barbara Walters. I am trying to
Yeah,
make you
yeah.
cry.
I definitely feel like I'm in the psychoanalysis chair. Uh, Interesting questions. I've never ever been asked anything like this. Huh. Well, the first, let's see. So, well, this is going to sound very cold. I'll flip on it and say the other side of it. But when you're making business decisions, I don't think you should let emotions play into it. I
Mm-hmm.
think you need to, and I am always surprised by this.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, guys actually are more. Uh, I see more issues with this in guys than gals
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason. Um, uh, so it's interesting that you know that's my take on it. But the decisions that need to be made need to be based on like logic and really thinking and critical thinking, and apply it to water, the technical aspects. Of course there's a commercial aspect, but again, you should not let emotion play into it. Now the flip side of that is, I do believe that you have to be emotionally charged, not focused in decision making, but charged by this. Because if you don't have that, then why are you doing it? And there's that drive. Anybody that's fell in love or had an infatuation, or whether it be a person or a vehicle, like I really love that Maserati. Why does it make me feel like this?
That's
uh, you need those sort of charges to keep you fueled, to keep you motivated, to drive you and keep the desires up and alive. But at the same time, that same charge should not override and spill over into the decision making and the logic of it. Um, so, lessons learned from a heartbreak aspect of that. I think everything was based on um, the feeling. It was, especially the first one, probably was just all feeling. It was nothing about anything else.
mm-hmm.
There was maybe there was the fantasy of the kids and the dogs and the white picket fence, but probably not at 7 or 8, but maybe.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's kind of like a lesson learned is that we need to have that you know charge and desire and passion to fuel us to keep going, but at the same time that should not dictate how we make decisions. So I think we really need to be better critical thinking.
Absolutely. And we did discuss that, I think, a little bit the other day. Like something like sustainability is a
Mm.
critical thinking issue, right? That's just not a left or right issue. It's a critical thinking issue. Um,
Or PR today.
right, right,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
mean, I think we've been, especially in the water community, we've been a little overwhelmed, I'll put it nicely, with ESG and sustainability topics. But if we do look at it, critically and look and ask the tough questions, like how are you measuring, how are you monitoring, what are you doing with this information, how is it driving you to your goals, and what are your goals? And again, how are you measuring that and monitoring that? So all these things, instead of just talking about nice talking points for stakeholders, I think it's much more meaningful to talk about the how and why of getting there to make something sustainable. Because otherwise, it really becomes more of a topic that's it feels like a catchphrase, and that's all
Mm,
that's, and it's very quarterly focused. And I don't think sustainability and ESG initiatives should be a major focus of a individual quarter. I think it has to be a longer range, annual, 3 years, 5 years. What do we, um, the road is a little bit longer, so we have to look at it that way.
you're absolutely right. And it's funny because as human beings, we are emotional creatures.
Yeah,
Just as by default,
yeah,
right? And a lot of times also, as has been said in sales and sales analysis, that we make an emotional decision, and then the caboose right behind the locomotive is our logic trying to justify that emotional reason.
right.
And much like you also said about men in oil and gas, I mean, let's be real, right? We're all a bunch of alpha males. And a lot of us sometimes we can't be nuanced enough to separate ourselves from our opinions and ideas. So my opinion and my idea and myself are the same. You reject my opinion, you reject me, and now we're going to have a fight about it, right? One way or another. And
Yeah,
that tends to happen a lot. But
yeah,
you're correct, because you have to ask, right, what is your goal? What is your intent? What is your end point? Because that dictates then how you approach what you're even doing. So, like you were saying, for example, you want to make improvements, but there are other people that say oil and gas needs to stop. So, there are people who are trying to do away with what you're doing altogether. Um, but having an emotional charge is absolutely necessary, because without
yeah,
that, there's no reason to move forward. So, like you say, well, why am I treating this water? Well, because the EPA says I need to treat it. Okay, level one, say, right? Level two is I work here, and if I don't do my job, then the water plant goes down, and I can't feed my family. There's another level. But then the other level is I care about my community. I care about society. I care about the people around me because there's no difference between them and me, right? Oh, so and so got cancer. Why me? Why not you?
Right.
Right? Could it happen to anybody?
Yep.
So my caring is for the long play.
Right.
Am I going to maybe bitch and moan here and there? Am I going to make mistakes along the way? Sure. But the overall goal is the same.
Yeah.
And like you say, but then sometimes we get wrapped up in the quarterly, and both the heart and the head have to live together.
Yeah.
And that's
For
also
sure.
one of the dualities, right? That we're constantly living in, is that our heart and our head has to operate at the same time. Uh, what are some of the things going on today? So, like we had sort of talked about before, and I was even thinking about again this morning that in my layman's logic, even though I'm a water professional, or I was a water professional, you would think after tens of thousands of years of human existence, we would have stumbled upon the optimal way of treating water,
Hmm.
right? Ultimately, there are some answers that ultimately culminate in the same thing, right? You can do what you want. Gravity's always going to take over. So, like, hey, we just let that go, right? We talked about automotives, automobiles being more aerodynamic for fuel efficiency. And so, therefore, eventually all cars wound up being egg shaped for being aerodynamic. But it's shocking to me how there is many different ways to treat water as there are people who are working on the problem. And I'm still fascinated by that there is no uh, generally standard accepted way of treating water, and then maybe having certain additions for particular items that are in that water, right?
Right.
Um, do you see any kind of consensus coming around water treatment in general from your global perspective? Because you're a globetrotter, so
Yeah, I mean, definitely think there's more commonalities than differences. Now, albeit there's a lot of regional aspects that cause those differences to happen in especially when we're talking about, let's say, water treatment, specifically produced water treatment. Um, and then there's some other influences, and some are company driven. Uh, there's a wide range of drivers, I think, for why things are different. But I do believe that some of the aspects that shape how things are done, um, and I'll exclude the Permian, for example, right now, because I'll get back to that thought in a bit. But just globally, excluding the Permian, let's say, um, the foundational technologies that have been used since the beginning of time, or definitely since the 60s, 70s, and 80s, or at least 65 years plus.
yeah.
Some of them are kind of forgotten or not really applied correctly or put in the right place. Some of it's very simple. Why is this strainer here? Why is this pump here? Why are you using these type of valves? Very, very simple
Mm-hmm.
things, but also not very simple today, because I think some of those foundational building blocks are not discussed and talked about. Definitely not in school, and if they're not talked about at work with the mentors, or you see good practice put into place, how is that going to be replicated? Because not everything's greenfield or brownfield. Some of it's there. There is new production and new fields being developed. So the greenfield aspect is real. So if you're basing some bad experiences and bad examples for how you build the new city, the new field, it's not good. Um, the Permian is a unique example of this, where, and I think there's many reasons why it's in this predicament. Years ago, 10, 15 years ago, the volume and the infrastructure wasn't there. Today we have plenty of volume. Infrastructure is very well developed compared to where it was 10, 15 years ago. So we don't have those obstacles that we have today. But the thing that hasn't changed so much dramatically is the way what had been done up to this point. So you see things that are kind of like, why is this? I brought a guy in from the UK. He traveled all around the world to all these different fields, different companies, and he came to the Permian. He was so excited for the first time back, I think it was 2017, and he was so excited to see the Permian. Um, and then he called me after his first hour at site and said, "What are they doing here? Yeah, I'm so confused. Like, everything is in the wrong place. Everything is sized totally incorrectly." Uh, and I said, "Yep, yep." And I said, "Well, the reason that they bought that AST was because it was available at the time,
Right.
and forget about the size and the reason that they put that strainer in there is because they didn't know any better." Because that's where they thought they had the problem. They didn't realize it was coming from further upstream.
Right.
A whole host of these sort of easy things that if you've been around and seen it 3,000 times before, you and this was a young guy, but he was really surprised. I said, "Yeah, that's." But I think the focus has been, especially when it comes to water, oil and gas production, not what to do with the water,
Hmm.
and the focus has been production. Go go go. Worry about everything else later, especially the water. And that's one of the things why I also think, going back to the global example of why things maybe are not done quote unquote properly, is because water is kind of too far down on the rung of the ladder to be important enough to have your water leaders have a voice at the table. Water is being talked about a lot more. It seems to be a lot more interesting, and definitely sustainability and ESG folks are throwing that into the mix. But also, are they looking at it more holistically and total life cycle of water, or are they only looking at just one little aspect and focusing on beneficial reuse? Okay, well that is very exciting and important, but what about kind of like the other? Well, I call it the four R's. When you look at the aspects of you know how you're producing, how you're recycling and using, and then also kind of reassessing the whole life cycle, because you really want to be able to take into account, you know, leaving the water that's in the ground versus bringing it up if you can. Much like we did in horizontal drilling in the U.S.
Hmm.
Um, Aramco in Saudi Arabia is doing a great job of keeping water in the ground instead of bringing it up. Various different purposes, but that does require everything that needs a discussion with completions and drillings and reservoir engineers, not just the further downstream folks, the production and the HSE and the regulatory folks. It needs to be a lot of different interdisciplinary teams involved in the conversation, and thinking of water as a whole life cycle, not just a byproduct of something that's produced with oil and gas. So again, I think if we're able to look at it a little bit differently and make water more important, it becomes more of a valuable resource and an asset, not a waste. Because one of my pet peeves is people calling produced water wastewater or a waste. Um, okay, it's a byproduct, but again, byproduct, much like not too long ago, gas was a byproduct, and look what we did with gas. So I do firmly believe water will become the next gas. It'll be the commodity that we look at as a resource and trade it, and value it a lot more. So again, if you don't value something, the education and the foundational layout of a facility will be impacted.
Do you think that there's something going on where no one can deny the importance of water? No one can deny the future will only be more difficult in terms of water. And so it's very low. Like on one hand, it's very low, as you say, it's very low on the rung, and it's considered waste. But as we had in a previous discussion, right now it's just a cost because people have to pay they have to pay to
Or a
dispose
problem
of
or
it.
something to deal with.
Right. So it's something to deal with instead of it being an asset in and of itself. And
Right.
but who's going to go ahead and spearhead something to that effect on that scale? I mean, that's a, again, like you say, it's multidisciplinary, and it's taking a very long look at the life cycle. Um,
Right.
but
Well,
again,
I think
go.
I was going to say part of the problem I think with that is the mindset, though. You know, maybe you and I agree that it's a valuable resource and asset, but I've heard from multiple people that water is free, and we know this is not the case. And I've heard that it's abundant. It's almost as if they're talking like it's unlimited. Well, we have plenty of water. And I think, there's certain parts of the world where, you know, you would never hear this. And there are certain places, I mean, we do have a lot of resources here in the US. I mean, we're very lucky that we have so many. So I think some of these faulty mindsets of water is free and water is abundant and, unlimited is a really, really bad mindset to fall into. But I think that may be shaping some of why water and specifically produced water in oil production and gas production is not up a rung or two is because that importance really, that mindset has kind of permeated the thinking and the importance of water. So, but again, there's also the other extreme where people, I mean, I guess that's why they made Waterworld years ago. um, I do think that we'll have in certain parts of the world that it's kind of a reality today where water is very, very precious, um, where you can't rely on it, having it. So Africa is a great example of that. So, again, just depending on where you are and where you're sitting and how you're thinking, I think it dictates a lot of that. But again, like you said earlier, we're all part of this global, this ball that spinning around that we all live on. So we do have responsibility and impact to make, each of us individually.
Right. And I agree with you. No, no, obviously. And we are all stakeholders, and we are all responsible, absolutely. Because we all do live, we all do breathe, we all do. Okay. But and I know this conversation wasn't going there, and I don't want to necessarily take it there, but I reject on its face a lot of times impositions to me personally and how I lead my life, or any one individual, how they lead their lives relative to things that happen on epic industrial scales, and by actors that are not good faith actors. Let's see, we're in the United States. I think I'm free to say China if I like, right? Like China, in a lot of ways, is not a good faith actor in what they do. I don't need to know anything about anything to make that statement and know that I'm right. And so it is difficult a lot of times because you have people who want to be good faith actors, but as much like we're saying, right? I'm in the front of the boat trying to in front of the canoe, trying to bucket the water out, and you're behind me bucketing water in, and we're just not going to get there because it's a question of mindset. And I think that there has to be more. And I think that, well, let's say, for lack of a better term, our interlocutors on the other side of this conversation, they would also agree. They would have to agree that education does need to change to understand that water is not free. It is
Mm.
not. It is not. Um, if there's somebody who is young and they want to make some sort of an impact, but they want to get paid, right? Because they work in oil and gas.
Yeah.
But if somebody was interested in produced water or getting into being a water professional, what would you say are the contours today, and what's the promise of the future in produced water?
Yeah, I do believe that there's a growing need, and you can get paid for that. So again, I think picking, and I don't, I get asked this all the time, especially by young professionals and you know people in school, deciding um, what to pursue next, or am I making the right choice? And I don't really think it makes a difference if you're a mechanical engineer or chemical engineer or any other aspect. If you've got a desire to do it, do what makes sense and excites you and motivates you. But what you do with that and how you apply it and where you go, you can you can let that kind of lead the way, that motivation. Um, it is also hard to get, like Produce Water Society has been trying to get more young professionals involved.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if it's just, everybody seems busier today, or maybe we haven't, the society has not done a good enough job, obviously, of getting the word out there. But we have very few young professionals. We have more, folks coming into the industry, in their 30s, but we don't. I don't see a lot of tons of students taking interest. Although we are reaching out to more and more of the universities, like UTPB
Hmm.
in the Permian will now uh, work with Produce Water Society to offer regional workshops
Hmm.
at their university. So great facility, and takes a lot of the planning and loading off of Produce Water Society, and so we're able to focus on the education. Um, I think those sort of outreaches are very key. The scholarship program that we offer, the Colin Tyrese Scholarship Program, is still very much alive, even though I think people have kind of forgotten about that. Well, not only should you apply, and you can find the parameters online at producewatersociety.com, but you can also talk to your to your faculty and directors at your university to find out more. We also need sponsors for that. We rely on sponsorship for the academic scholarships, and we'd
Right.
love to offer more and more of those. I think that is a great way to motivate. For example, we had a guy come from. Well, we've had more of an international draw lately, but someone out in the Midwest, I don't know if it was from Michigan or where, had came to me personally and said, I think I can't remember if it was $500 or the $2,000 or whatever we applied towards travel, so that he could come present his technical presentation. He said, you don't know how much that meant, not only just to make it happen, because that was a lot of money for a student, but just to be recognized and valued, and he was very appreciative, and that really was great to see. Uh, that sort of, and I'd love to see more and more of that, and I'd love to be able to do more of it. But again, I think getting people interested, whether it's a 20-year-old or a 35-year-old, doesn't really matter. And we have some folks that are coming in from other industries. Interesting enough, people are actually, maybe they're not calling it oil and gas, but they're calling it the energy sector. They're coming from other industries to play a role in water. So however you need to position it for you, I think that's fine. I've seen a lot of this in places like Holland,
Hmm.
where it used to be really, really exciting to work for, Shell. Not so much today. So, there's that association. Although a lot of the IOCs have done a real good, I guess, marketing job on trying to get folks around the fact that there's oil and gas and that they're energy, and focusing more on renewables. So again, that's fine, and I can tell you the renewable folks, because I'm on a lot of different boards, including the Stanford Energy Club. They all have the same problems as and issues and concerns that we have in oil and gas. So the water issues, even if you're talking about solar, and I worked on a job in Oman where solar and water were closely interacting. It's important to be able to solve the water problems, whether you're talking about a renewable project, a nice green project, or the old traditional oil and gas job. So again, if you make that decision that you want to do something and do more, I think there's a lot, SPE, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Produce Water Society. There's a host of other ways to get involved, but don't just become a member. And this goes for the more seasoned folks too. I try to encourage people to get more involved, because I think and I've done this in especially my earlier career. I joined a lot of societies and groups, but it becomes a lot more interesting and meaningful and beneficial to the society, to the organization and the person, if you join a committee or two, and if you do take initiatives on your own and be a driving force instead of just sign up, if you get more involved, you get so much more out of it, and your community does too. So again, even more important than just joining is become active with a committee or two. Uh, Find something of interest. If it duplicates what you're doing in your day job, all the better, because then you don't have to put on a different hat, kind of double dip. But again, I think focusing on those sort of things make a big difference. And if there's any ideas for ways to motivate younger folks today, aside from making a produced water TikTok dance, I'm all for it, because that will not be me.
Shoot.
Uh, well, maybe if the sponsorship's high enough, maybe I could be enticed.
Or could be enticed. 10-4. So yes, when the money's on the table, then yes, now everything's revealed.
Everything might be up for discussion.
Everything might be up for discussion. No, you're absolutely right that, and it's almost like the elephant in the room in a weird way that everybody knows is there, but they're just too drunk to even notice. That right, everyone has problems and issues with water, but maybe because of the industries, everything is very balkanized. No one is sharing information on what they're doing, and listen, dare I even say, I will dare, and I will say, there's a large flourishing cannabis
Yeah.
cultivation going around the country that uses an incredible amount of water,
Yes.
right? So who would have thought that maybe someone in cannabis production would say, "Hey, I have an idea on how to deal with this water. I do this and this, and look what it does." You never know, but
Yep.
unless you have enough people coming into the tent to share ideas, we will never know. And as you said, right, when you're in your 20s, your people are motivated for the most part, right, by things that are above and beyond themselves. Now, we need to get paid, right? We need to feed the bulldog. That does happen. That's a fact, a material fact. But we're motivated by things beyond us. And I really appreciate that, like you're saying, like the SPE, the PWS, that they can come and they can kind of show a path to
Hmm.
students and people who are interested and say, look, there's an entire world going on over here. And you have not only an opportunity, but even an obligation to contribute and to try to make things better. And I think that when you can show everyone, or this target audience, that there
Yep.
is a receptive community, that there are
Yep.
people that want to hear their ideas and that they're valued, right? Join a committee and be taken seriously and
Yep.
then step up. And then you're really contributing, you're really doing something. Don't let other people do it for you, because other people are not thinking much of you. And if you let them do it, what are
Right.
they going to have for you? Well, not
Right.
much,
Right.
right?
And you don't have to be a traditional, engineering school trained, individual. If you're coming from a big business background or an economics background or psychology background, um, you can still make a huge difference. You just have to have that drive or motivation to an interest to go do that. And actually, it's nice. I talked to a gal out here in California, a researcher who is a mechanical chemical engineer, but also now focusing on her MBA and very interested in business. And she was talking about water and lithium extraction and some of the interesting business aspects of produced water. And so she's fully charged now, much more, I guess, than before, wearing her engineering hat with her business hat. So I think
Right.
there's a lot of driving factors that motivate people to do things. So if you find something, even if it's after your undergrad degree, you can still decide what to do and still make a difference. So definitely we encourage everybody to get involved. So if you're not sitting at the table and being part of the discussion or leading the discussion, then you're just you're just reading about it in the news, and yes, then you will have no impact.
Right. What is it they say that 5% of the people make things happen, 15% watch those people make it happen, and then 80% ask what happened.
What happened? Yep. Yep.
All right. So Steve, I really very much appreciate your taking the time from your very busy schedule to come and talk to us a little bit about the Produced Water Society and
Thank you. I
the good
appreciate
things
it.
you're doing. No,
Yeah, no,
absolutely.
it was great. I'm used to talking more about a process and a lot more in the weeds when it comes to technical and a lot of numbers. But yeah, the only number that I will leave you with is the number that's produced water. Water volumes are growing.
Mhm.
We're currently at about 238 billion barrels per year. Some are predicting in the next few years that we reach 340 billion barrels per year. In Texas alone, we're at 44 million barrels per day, or 1.6 billion barrels per year. And about the majority of that, let's say close to two-thirds, is coming from the unconventional market, and about two-thirds of that is coming from the Permian.
Mm.
So there's a phenomenal volume of water and produced water being managed and thought about in West Texas. So uh, the numbers are big and they're growing, and they're also global. So um, I do believe that there's plenty of opportunity and interesting ways for everybody to have an impact on whatever they however they think of water and produce water in their daily lives.
Those are huge numbers, and I think that it only, and again, this will actually sew up a couple of aspects. This really is the area for the future. This, at the moment, there is, in oil and gas production, there have been technological advances, and now there's refinement of those advances. In water, there's all kinds of advances happening everywhere. However, this I think is one of the most exciting times to get into water
I think
in
so.
general. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the future is very, very bright because these are challenges that need solutions, and we need the best and the brightest to address these issues. And it really, once again, Steve, I cannot imagine anyone better being at the forefront of this conversation than you. You do it with
Thank you.
eloquence and with style. You have absolutely earned the deepest respect from all of your colleagues,
Well, thank
not
you.
only here in the United States, and I can tell you, you're so well respected here in the Permian and around the world. Please keep doing the amazing work that you're doing, Steve. And you will find us here at the Oilfield Leader podcast. You're absolute willing participants in helping get the message out and helping more people understand the value of produced water and trying to get people into contributing something towards the solution.
Great.
So
Well,
I want.
since you are in Midland,
Mhm.
you're definitely invited, and bring your mic and camera out to the Horseshoe, August 12th through 14th. We've got our ninth annual Permian event. So we're very excited to be back in West Texas again. And again, definitely, we love to have this live coverage. Uh, and don't be concerned if there's multiple, news folks and podcasters and journalists out there. There's everybody tunes into their channel,
Right.
so you're definitely welcome, and it's a great opportunity to get some live, reactions as it's happening. So you're invited, and your viewers are invited. So we're excited to be back. It's always a great event, and of course, West Texas is a lot of fun, and the people are great. So we love to have that nice warm welcome. Now, mentioning warm, all of our it will be warm. It's in
August.
August, but guess what? We're indoors, and we've even brought the rigs, the 40-foot trailers inside in the air conditioning, so
Sweet.
you can take a look at kit that is used in the oil field with AC.
With AC, wonderful. It just couldn't be any better. Next, you're going to tell us there's free popcorn. That's amazing.
There are some free things. There's quite a few free things, including some barbecue and drinks, and a lot of great hospitality. So
Shh, we're going to let the secret out. We're going to let the secret out. So everyone, August 12th to 14th at the Horseshoe. I will absolutely be there, Steve. Thank you very,
awesome,
very much.
great,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much for that invitation. We'll absolutely be there, and we're going to let the viewers in because this is a conversation that I would like to have with you, perhaps maybe 2 or 3 times a year. sort
Yeah,
of just
for
touch
sure.
base on where we are, and maybe we can kick up some issues. Maybe we kick off some initiatives, and we can come back and we can discuss where we're doing with those initiatives, and we can let everybody know what we're doing.
For sure. Count me in.
Absolutely.
I
All
appreciate it.
right.
Thanks for the time today. That was great.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, please follow Steve. You're going to find him on LinkedIn. You're
Yep.
also going to find him at the producedwatersociety.com. All the
On
links will
Twitter.
be in the description below. Any last words you want to get out to the folks, Steve?
Um, well, if you are listening from elsewhere in the world, there's a push that we're working on now for the Doha event in Qatar in September. It's the third week in September, and then the Saudi event, which will be a regional annual regional event, ninth annual in Saudi Arabia in Hobart. In the second week of December. So mark your calendars for those things. But I know there's a lot of events globally, but we've had a handful of West Texas folks come out and visit us at the Saudi event the last 2 years. And I think the Doha event in September, this will be a first edition that we're doing in Doha. So we're
Nice.
excited about that. But yeah, there's lots of exciting things happening the rest of the year in addition to the Permian event in August.
Awesome. 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 Well, everyone is going to be able to follow that and keep
Yep.
track of it. And we can't wait to have you back on the show. So,
Thank you.
Steve Coffey, thank you very much, sir, once again for your time and your wisdom and your input. We
Greatly
appreciate it.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All
Ladies
right.
and gentlemen, until the next episode, thank you very much,
All
everybody.
right. Cheers.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Cheers.